Let me tell you a story about a man who dreamed he was being chased through the forest by a bear, and then when he woke up, he found that he had died. Is it possible to die in your sleep? And if you do die in your dreams, does that mean that you die in real life? Stay tuned, because today we're answering the question, if you die in your dream, do you die in real life? Our next Reddit post is from /Todopy4Dog. My dad told me this story when I was younger, and he says that it happened to his friend's cousin, which makes it about 3 degrees removed. So I don't know how accurate it is, but here goes. This person was living in a small house in the woods with only one other person, a girlfriend. One night they heard what sounded like screams in the forest. They didn't think much of it since they lived so far out in the woods that animals occasionally made their way into the house. One morning, they went out back to find a huge bear that had managed to break down their back door and ransack their kitchen. They killed the bear. A few nights later, the same thing happened. The couple heard screams in the forest, and when they went outside, they found another bear that had gotten inside the house. Again, they killed the bear. This continued to happen over and over again. Each time they would kill the bear, the next night another one would come. After a few months of this, the guy told his dad that he was so tired of all these bears breaking into their house that he was gonna sit out in the forest and wait for one to attack him. He wanted to fight back against the bears and put an end to the nightly break-ins once and for all. That night, the guy did exactly what he said he would. He went out into the forest and waited. Soon enough, a bear found him and mauled him to death. His girlfriend woke up, went out to check on him, and found his body the next morning. When my dad asked his friend if they had checked to see if there were any signs of bear, his friend replied there were no signs of struggle or anything. It was almost like he had fallen asleep in the middle of the forest and just never woke up. Now, I have no idea how true this story is, but I'm sure you're thinking the same thing that I was when I first heard it. How could a bear get into the house multiple times without making any signs of forced entry? Also, why did the guy go outside to confront the bear instead of just staying inside? There are easier ways to defend yourself from a bear than trying to fight it in the wilderness. But regardless of whether or not this story is true, it brings us to an interesting topic, dying in your dreams. For those of you who have ever experienced sleep paralysis before, you know that it's kind of like a limbo between wakefulness and sleep. You can move your eyes, but not your body. You're aware of your surroundings, but you're also dreaming. It's pretty freaky. Some people even claim that during sleep paralysis, you can see and interact with spirits or demons. Well, apparently, sleep paralysis can make things worse. Some people experience night terrors while under the influence of sleep paralysis. Night terrors are essentially panic attacks that occur while you're sleeping. If you have a night terror, you might thrash around in your sleep and scream at the top of your lungs. People who experience sleep paralysis and night terrors often feel exhausted throughout the day. So now let's bring all of this back to our Reddit post. Could the man have been suffering from sleep paralysis and having night terrors every night? Perhaps he was under the influence of sleep paralysis when he heard the sounds of bears in the forest and thought that his house was actually being attacked. In his terror, he ran outside to escape. But I think there's something else going on here, too. Have you ever heard of SUNDS? SUNDS stands for Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome. It's a relatively new medical term for the phenomenon of people dying suddenly in their sleep for seemingly no reason. It was first described in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1977. The main symptoms of SUNDS include waking up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason, feeling suffocated or paralyzed, and then ultimately dying. Waking up in the middle of the night is a common symptom of sleep paralysis. Feeling suffocated is also consistent with sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis has even been linked to cases of SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome. Although researchers are still working to figure out what causes it, sleep paralysis seems to play some kind of role. So, is it possible that the man in our Reddit post was experiencing episodes of sleep paralysis every night? And did he die during one of these episodes? Maybe? Have you ever had a nightmare that you were being chased? Did you wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding in your chest? Or maybe you've never had that particular nightmare, but you've woken up gasping for air after having a bad dream. When you have a nightmare, your brain sends signals to your body to prepare for action. Your heartbeat increases, your breathing becomes more rapid, and your muscles tense up. This happens because your brain doesn't know the difference between a dream and reality. So, if you're having a nightmare, it thinks that you're in danger. This reaction is known as the fight or flight response. During a nightmare, adrenaline pumps into your bloodstream, your heart begins to race, and your breathing becomes faster. Your muscles tense up, preparing you to either fight off an attacker or run away from a dangerous situation. Of course, if you're having a nightmare, you're perfectly safe. But your brain doesn't know that, so it reacts as if you're in real danger. Now, sometimes this reaction can be so intense that it causes you to physically react. People have died from having nightmares before, so although it might seem scary, it is likely that the man in our Reddit post simply died from a heart attack brought on by a nightmare. Let's move on to our next Reddit post. It's from you/elbondito82. When I was in college, I lived in the same apartment complex as a very close friend of mine. We were hanging out in his apartment late at night, playing video games and drinking when his phone rang. He answered the phone and began talking in a low voice. He listened intently and then hung up. He told me that it was his mother calling from out of town. She had called to tell him that she had a recurring nightmare that I was going to die in my sleep. She told him that she didn't want to bother him, but she felt compelled to call him anyway. My friend had brushed it off and continued playing video games. His mom called twice that night. The second time he picked up, he asked her to please stop calling him about this nonsense. He was annoyed and he told her to leave him alone. She apologized and then hung up. That night, my friend fell asleep on the couch in his apartment and I stayed up playing video games. About 2 hours after I fell asleep, I was awoken by a loud crash. I assumed that my friend had fallen off the couch or something. So I turned the lights on and started yelling at him to wake him up. He wasn't responding at all. I started screaming his name, but he still didn't respond. I panicked and called 911. The paramedics arrived shortly after and pronounced my friend dead. He had suffered a massive heart attack. I knew that his mother had called him earlier that evening, but I didn't think much of it. I figured that he had simply argued with her and she had passed away as a result. I was shocked when the police told me that he had died of a heart attack. It was crazy. The only person who knew that he had died that night was his mom. I never told anyone about this until recently. His mom didn't tell anyone else about her dream either until long after he died. This leads me to wonder, could my friend have died in his sleep because his mom had a premonition about it? I really hope this isn't one of those fake stories that people make up to try and explain their loved one's sudden deaths. That being said, I don't know if the mom could have somehow caused her son's death by having a premonition about it. That would basically be telekinesis, except instead of moving an object with your mind, you're causing someone to die. Our brains are incredibly powerful, but I don't think that anyone could die because of someone else's thoughts. However, I do think that there's a more logical explanation for what happened here. You see, when someone dies, their body begins to cool down. Eventually, the body reaches the same temperature as its surroundings. This process is known as algor mortis. The rate at which the body cools depends on a number of factors, including the person's age, size, and the temperature of the environment. On average, the body loses about 1 degree Fahrenheit per hour during the first 2 hours after death. This means that if a person dies at around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, their body will be about 86 degrees an hour later. Assuming that the room temperature was around 72 degrees Fahrenheit, it would take about 4 hours for the body to reach that temperature. So, my guess is that the boy's mom called him in the middle of the night and he died from a heart attack. Then she called again a couple hours later and he was already dead. But his body hadn't cooled down yet, so he looked alive. Then his body continued to cool down until it reached room temperature, at which point he appeared to be asleep. Now, I'm not saying that this is definitely what happened. I'm just throwing out a guess. This is the creepiest part of the story. After all, how could she have possibly known that he would die that night? Unless, of course, he did die that night. Is this just a myth? Or is there something darker at work in our dreams? Comment down below. If you want to hear more stories about the strange things that happen in our dreams, then check out my video, Can Dreams Come True? But as always, thanks for watching.